amazing, and I think that could be very good background of the entire Congress, because it's the first one speaker, and I think that could be something that could be behind the entire discussions. And I think that is Horacio waiting for his presentation, and I think that is now to give that welcome, and to I hope that our works, our discussion, our everything could be very good results, and without this difficulty start the rest of the Congress go in a good way. So, Horacio.
Wait a minute, Jose
Yes.
Manuel, do please let me also welcome everybody
okay.
As the co-organizer. We are also being joined by a few more people who have received our message somewhat belatedly. First of all, many apologies for the technical problems that we have been experiencing. We need to adjust this for tomorrow and the next weekend. I think the easiest thing would be to stay with this email address, since it's from my account, and I can organize the Zoom session accordingly. I wanted to thank the University of Navarra for sponsoring this event, and especially Jose Manuel, who has organized things within the university. Also, I'd like to thank the Conference of International Architectural Critics, especially Luis Noel Gras and Manuel Quadra, for organizing their side of things and making the announcement on within their organization and on their website. Again, as last year, when we discussed the topic of architectural criticism, we are going to have 4 sessions over 2 weekends. And the timing is organized such that we have the opportunity of having people both from the eastern part of the world as well as the western part of the world. And of course, Europe happens to be in the middle. Let me give you a quick review of the proceedings of last year's conference, and I will share my screen accordingly. This is the inside of the book. It's 384 pages, and it has numerous essays, including Horacio Torrent here, and I won't go through everything, but you will see that it's a very dense. This is Louis' essay. It's a very dense collection of papers, and I can assure you that we have been extremely meticulous in both the typography and the copy editing. So this has gone through probably 12 different copy editing phases, and it's an incredibly dense publication. So I look forward to collecting the papers once again for the next book, which should be rather like this. That's the cover. Sorry, I need to. This is the cover of the book. The central area here is the spine. So that is kind of a very clean and I hope also quite powerful graphic design that will attract the attention of potential buyers. So the topic of last year's, thank you, the topic of last year's conference and the discussions of last year's conference led directly to the request by a number of you that we should actually focus on quality. And so we organized this. I must admit that my personal circumstances, since I've resigned from my professorship at UT, has meant that the organizational preparation for this were very compressed, and as a result, the actual review time for the submitted papers rather short. Anyhow, I'm very glad that there were substantive submissions of abstracts, and that we have selected a number of them, fewer this time because we wanted also to make more time available for discussions. So that's a little bit about the past and the current conference. And I'm sure we're going to debate both traditional ideas of quality as well as contemporary notions. And for that, we have made a selection of speakers from across the world again. And we have Silvia Arango from the western part of the world, so to speak. William Curtis joining us from Europe. Fo Matsipa from South Africa, and Rahul Mkhotra from India. So we have once again a global set of keynote lecturers, and that is also matched by a global set of shorter papers. And having said that, I've come to the end of my brief introduction, and I hope that now we can proceed without any technical glitches. The timetable is slipping somewhat, but Silvia Arango will be speaking for 40 minutes. We will then have a 30-minute question and answer session, followed by a break, and then there will be the short paper by Luis. So thank you for your kind attention, and now it's over to Horacio.
Thank you, Wilfred. Thank you, Jose Manuel. I'm very glad to stay here with you. And of course, thank you for the University of Navarra. I'm very honored to introduce Silvia Arango. She has been professor of history and theory of architecture and urbanism at the School of Architecture and Urbanism in the University of Colombia in Bogota. Silvia has a degree of architecture from the University of Los Andes in Bogota also. She developed studies at the Oxford Polytechnic and has a PhD on urbanism from the University of Paris. He wrote two very, very interesting books and a lot of essays and a lot of papers. The books are The History of Architecture in Colombia, published in 1989, and also The Story of an Itinerary. And the last one is The City and Architecture, Sixth Generation That Built Modern Latin America, published by the Fondo de Cultura Económica in 2012. She has been involved in the SAL, Seminarios of Latin American Architecture, since its creation, I think, in 1985 or around. She was very involved in the new revision of the history of Latin American architecture during the last, what can I say, 30 years mostly. She was a professor, visiting professor at the University of Puerto Rico in Rio Piedras, and then in the Federal University in Rio de Janeiro, and also was postdoctoral resident in the in National University of Mexico in the Instituto de Estéticas. And also she received a fellowship from the Guggenheim Foundation. I think it was in 19 something or around 1992, and also she had a grant of the Getty Institute for a very interesting work on Latin America also. For me, it's a pleasure and honor to see Silvia again. We have no see each other for a long time, and I hope all of you enjoyed this very, very interesting lecture about quality in architecture. Silvia, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Well, I'll try to share. I think Wilfred has to accept to be able to share the.
I have just enabled sharing.
What? It shows now?
Yes.
Well, I have titled this Quality and Recognition of Quality in Architecture. Oops, sorry. Well, I must start saying that for me, that's the most insidious question one can make. It's a very tricky question. And this is where the trial that we are trying to deal with today. The structure of this lecture is first trying to answer the question, what is quality in architecture? And then I will go on how it's quality recognized in both, in leaving aside the personal recognition, two communal recognitions, the professional recognition and the social recognition. And to start with the beginning, even if it's a cliche, I will start with Vitruvius. I would like to recall that the Vitruvius was written the beginning of the 1st century of our age, but it was discovered or seen in Europe in a more popular way just until the middle 15 centuries after, in the middle of the 15th century. There were many manuscripts that circulated through the Middle Age, through the different parts of Europe. So this is just one complete manuscript who served as a basis for the editions that they were making after. I must recall too that the book of Alberti was that was based on the 10 books of Vitruvius, was edited before the first edition of Vitruvius. And then we have, it was without illustrations. And then, the first edition in Latin was made just until 1486, as you can see. And 4 years later, was Leonardo da Vinci making his Man of Vitruvius, who evidently showed that he knew very well these manuscripts or the first edition. The first illustrated edition, Leonardo's drawing would be the first illustration about Vitruvius books. The book that the manuscript that has as a title Architecturae was published as 10 books of architecture, which is the same title that Albertich shows. And then after the first illustrated Latin edition, it became an Italian edition, and just in the second part of it, as you can see here, the different editions in different languages were going through the 16th century, and then after in 17th century. This brief recall is just for saying something that is very obvious, but I think that is good to underline, is that we know Vitruvio through the filter of the Italian Renaissance. And that means many things. And through the eyes of the Italian Renaissance, one of them that for me is very important is the Platonic influence that permeates all the text of Vitruvio. I'm not going to make any approach more in detail of Vitruvius' book, but just will have some words around this triad of values that appeared in the proemium of the first book of the original text in Latin. Appears the words utilitas, venustas, and firmitas as the three main values of architecture. If one think about it, it's very interesting, this presentation, because it's a triad, it's a triangle of three values, say, that are three in one, like divinity, that is one and is three, and that shows or manifests different parts of a being. Venustas, that can be translated as beauty, that belongs to the realm of aesthetics, but it is captured through the senses, and utilitas, that is the search for good, and is of the realm of politics, and it needs some faculties of mind, like soul, of the soul, like courage, and firmitas, that is could be related to the truth, and is of the realm of ethics, and it has to do very much with the faculties, the men's faculties of the mind, like reason. That's, to me, that's why the three main Kant's books has to do with this. Kant's critique of pure reason, Kant's critique of practical reason, and Kant's critique of judgment. When one thinks about what these three things are, they're difficult to define. I would say that are aims of architecture, or ideals of architecture, or one could say inherent attributes of architectures. Is a desire of what architecture should be. And I make this acclaration because in the first proemium, we must recall that Vitruvius says that there are three parts of architecture: mechanics, mnemonic, and building. And all the 10 books of architectures are structured through this basic idea of the parts that composes architecture. Outside all the discussions we this can have, he also talks in the other part of this proemium of the first book of 6 principles of architecture: order, arrangement, eurythmy, symmetry or proportion, propriety or ornament, and economy or distribution. This is under discussion as well, these correspondences of the principles. So what we think about the triad, venustas, firmitas, and utilitas, they are not principles of architecture, and they are not parts of architecture. They're aims of architecture. And we must, when one sees the different translations that these words have had in different languages, I have here just the equivalents I found in English. One finds that for utilitas can be commodity or utility or usefulness or use or purpose. There are many words that describes what utilitas firmitas also can be translated with many words, each one with its nuance, with its slight difference in meaning. But venustas has much shorter among quantity of words that describe venustas. Normally is beauty, but some people prefers delight. It could be also related with pleasure or elegance, which are not so clear about what venustas means. That is to say that in this triad, where 3 are in one, venustas is the most significant of the 3, because architecture could be said that belongs to the realm of aesthetics. In the Platonic thought, ideals, it's what really exists, but men can't perceive it directly. So we need to incarnate, embody these ideals to be recognized, to be perceived. So these values or these ideals have to be presented through examples that permits appropriation of them. So that's why I put such an interest on how is quality recognized, because then to the question, what is quality in architecture? I would say a very simple definition that is not very original. I would say that is the inherent tendency of human condition towards beauty. The same way that there is an inherent tendency towards the good and an inherent tendency towards the truth. That's why, to me, there is, for me, an evidence. And evidence is like a revelation. The evidence that the ratio decidendi, which is a word that lawyers use, is the final or determinant belief that is taken in account to make a decision. The beauty is the ratio decidendi of any judgment in architecture. Finally is what
he's here with his students.
sorry, there is a
he actually designed
One
this building.
I'm
have the
hearing a
microphone.
voice, strange voice.
Yes.
Well, in this part of what that's quality, I think it would be clear. So that I decided to go to recognition in the professional recognition of quality. I think the Supreme Court that assesses quality today is the Pritzker Prize. Not only because their aims, the objective of the prize, to honor a living architect or architects whose built work demonstrates a combination of those qualities of talent, vision, and commitment, which has produced consistent and significant contributions to humanity and the built environment through the art of architecture. Architecture as an art. It started, as everybody knows, in 1979, and it goes until this year. And in this period, they have given 43 awards. That means 51 laureates awarded people. It's significant also because the amount of money they give, $100,000. And since 1987, it gives also a medal, a bronze medal, that significantly has the triad of Vitruvius, as fairness, commodity, and delight printed on it. As if we make a little history of the prize, since 1979 until today, I think that there is 4 periods of the prize. One would be the launch of the prize. One would be the reach of success. That this process has to do very much with the internationalization of the prize. And then one could say that just in this century, in the 10 first years of this century, the prize suffered, had a process of canonization as the prize. And in the last years, there is a shaking or self-critique, a changing, and they begin to accept teams that wasn't common before this period, and also accept outsiders. I said that the launch took almost the 10 first years because certain commentaries of the laureates, the person that received the prize, on their discourse, that, for example, Isozaki, that was jury since the beginning, said it took about a decade to be known as the most prestigious award of the world. Also, some of the awarded people, the people that received the award that came from Europe, talk about the prize at the beginning as an American prize, meaning for America, United States, not all America. Or for example, when Aldo Rossi received the prize, said, "Thanks to America for this American prize." Or Fenn that said, "It is a characteristic that the Pritzker Prize is an American award." It took a time to be recognized as an international prize. And there is a big effort from the organizers to be international. At the beginning, the prize was given, the ceremony, the final ceremony was made in American buildings, mainly art galleries or museums, After they decided to do it in London, to do it in Japan, and the internationalization and the beginning of the canonization became when a president of a country gave the vobiscum to the prize. That was President Clinton in 1988 when the ceremony was held in the White House and with the presence of Hillary and himself and a speech and everything. So it was the prize. From that on, the organizers of the prize began to make it in the most important places of the world, like the Campidoglio, Versailles, the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, maybe even if there is no Russian laureate. Even in Latin America, there was in Buenos Aires in one moment. I would like to say that prices, until certain point, the prices recognize quality. But after its canonization, quality is recognized because the price. And architects nowadays look at the winner of the prize to see where is quality in architecture. Before, it was an effort of the prize for recognize or discover quality in the world. If we examine it by the laureated architects, we see that average age is 63 years. The oldest were Frei Otto, who died before received the prize, as we know, Doshi and Isozaki, that were very well when they received the prize, an Indian and a Japanese. And the youngest were one of the latest, the associate of Sejima, Shu, the Chinese, and Aravena, the Chilean. If we examine it by groups of age, we'll see that around a fourth were in the last part of their lives, above 70. And a fourth were young, below 54 years. The majority, half of the architects were or were in the moment they received the prize in the best moment of their careers, between 55 years and 69. If we know by gender, as you know very well, just 6 females had received the prize, and of them, just one, which is Zaha Hadid, was an architect alone. The others were part of teams. A team made by 2 women, one of them, and the others were part of teams. If we examine by place of origin, the majority came from Europe, and then America. I mixed here the America of the North and the America of the Center and the America of the South. From the Americas are the other parts, and Asia has the other part. Very few representation from Australia and Africa. If we see it by individual countries, the precedence of the majority of the people that win the prize came from the United States, and 8 of them come from the United States, 8 from Japan, and 6 from the United Kingdom. And one would say, well, the best architecture of the world has been made on these countries, or is Europe as a whole the trend, who shows to the rest of the world where is quality in architecture? If we analyze analysis of the discourses or the statements about architecture that the people in the ceremony and in the ceremony of the prize. I heard all of the speeches of the different winners, and it's very interesting. I have organized this in 4 main speeches. The first part and talk about architecture as art, and it's very frequent the word beauty as describing architecture. The word beauty is, until very recent, the majority of the architects who received the prize talks about beauty or the art of architecture. Like Frank Gehry that said that the purpose of architecture is provide a beautiful context for life's drama, or architecture lives and survives because of its beauty, Herzog and de Meuron, or, well, after that discourse, they overlap, but we have a discourse that talks about language, architecture as a language. And then the words that they were used were style or and also a discourse about place, architecture of the place, or the importance of nature. There are 2 winners that talk about the new digital technology, were Hulhas and Saha, as a very important revolution on architecture, but they were just those 2 and very concentrated at the beginning of the 21st century. Others, for example, Jean Nouvel said, architecture means the adaptation of conditions of a place to a given time, which was more or less the representative of this discourse. Then by 2010, we have a discourse about the expression, architecture as an expression of culture. And here the keywords are identity, materiality. For example, Xu, the Chinese, said clearly, are my buildings deeply rooted in my own culture. And finally, we find a discourse about social commitment, about the importance of filling the people's needs, a need of people, the beginning and the end of a process, said Aravena, and to feel inhabiting, to feel comfortable, entirely carried by spaces. If we see the juries, because a prize says as much of the winner as it says about the jury, I said the difference between the institutional juries provided by the organization of the prize, and it has to do mainly with directors of museums or even property developers and industrialists. And I think this part of the jury has the duty of have an equivalent geopolitical distribution of the prize. Oh, we forget we haven't given one to Norway. Just let's look an architect in Norway or in Finland or in some country that hasn't received, etc. And the ones evaluators of quality, more qualified, are precisely the representatives of the jury that represent the architectural community. And this architectural community has 2 branches, the branch of the critics and the branch of the architects. Of the critics, there are 2 poles of the critic in architecture. In the beginning, Arthur Drexler, And after Ada Luis Huxtable, who stayed 18 years in the jury. Also, we'll speak about Silvetti and Harvard now. And there are architects, I put here just the architects, some of them that have won the prize and that have lasted as juries at least for 5 years. If we put it in the time, we see that a first time has the Arthur Drexler era. He had published this book, Transformations in Modern Architecture, and was a defender of the late modernism, late architecture, late modern architecture, and effectively most of the winners of this period has those characteristics. Arata Isozaki and Ricardo Legorreta, that was part of the jury for a long time. Then comes for the long period of Ada Luis Huxtable. In one of the presentations, Jay Pritzker said, I don't, Mrs. Ada Luis Huxtable needs no presentation because everything she says goes. And I think really she was the most important person for the decisions of the last part of the 20th century, the beginning of this century, and accompanied by, for long periods, Jorge Silvetti, that was a dean of Harvard. And that was this desire of the prize of having a connection with academy, with like a legitimacy of the academic part of the thought of thinking of architecture. And the same Carlos Jimenez, that even if he was or is from Costa Rica, was always presented as an American architect of Rice University. I don't remember which university. And then after we have this period of change where Johanni Palashma was very important, Aravena was very important, and Glenn Murdoch, who is the winner from Australia. And here begins the discourse of nature, place, etc. And in the last years, we have an important contribution of Beneta Tlagiabue that lives in Spain, and two Japanese, Wang Shu, a Chinese, and the Japanese, Kazuko Sejima. If we make a correspondence of the discourses, we find a very straight correspondence between juries and discourses that are predominant in the prize. As long as I would say that a consensus of quality among the architectural community of experts are represented clearly in the Pritzker Prize. This is just a little exercise I made comparing the other court of quality nowadays is the Venice Biennale, and I see that the majority of people that has been winners of the prize had been even curators or received the Golden Lion for the life achievement in the Venice Biennale. Normally precedes the prize, the Pritzker Prize, and then they are invited as curators or given an award in the Venice Biennale. With three exceptions. Aldo Rossi in the beginning of the Biennale, when it was just an international architectural exhibition. The case of John Utzon, that received the prize after his intervention in the Venice Biennale, and Yvonne Farrell and Shelley McNamara, who were curators at the very recently, curators before they received the prize. And there were two that were coincident, the year they received the prize and the year they have their presentation in the Venice Biennale. Well, the third part is the social recognition of quality in architecture. And here I took the case of Colombia, not only for obvious reasons, but also because the social recognition about quality, the hypothesis is the social recognition of quality has two requirements. First, have received a professional recognition before, and then respond to needs of desires deeply believed of a group. The social recognition has a part that has to do with time, that are global, the contemporary beliefs, but there are some others that have to do with place, local need, climates, and geographies that are particular. I choose Colombia because, well, obvious reasons, but Colombia is also the average of Latin America, and Latin America is the average of the world. And there is sufficient diversity of climates and social situations to exemplify the social consensus about how quality in architecture is perceived nowadays. I am going to present some examples that consults both contemporary global beliefs and recognitions, local or international recognitions of them. I want to recall the 17 goals that was made by the United Nations in 2015, looking towards 2030. And these goals, I have resumed in just in 4 and show examples around each one. The first one has to do with the care of natural environment. We all know that the world has a few big natural areas that are the reserves of the world's in terms of ecological global terms, and there is an increasing conscience about the importance of preserve these natural environments. Of the many lineal parks and different types of parks that have made in Colombia lately, I chose this one in the river Sinú Monteria, which is a little town, because it received in 2014 one prize as the best sustainable city given by the Worldwide Fund for Nature, and is one example of this. And also is an example of this, the invention of the UNESCO of the cultural landscape as World Heritage. That's recent, and in Colombia, the coffee cultural landscape was chosen as World Heritage, which means not only to preserve a type of production, a type of landscape, but also the architecture related to it. And it has been very important for all this region in Colombia that is in the slopes of the river Cauca, of the Renaissance and putting value of these little towns has been a very important social movement that has given recently. And also the re-evaluation of local materials, like it happens in many other parts of the world, like the architect Simon Veles, widely recognized in different contexts, that works this wood, bamboo, and makes a very interesting structures with this material. All of this belongs to this movement of re-evaluation of local and regional materials and desires. The urban sprawl, that is a phenomenon that in Europe, all cities are beginning to mix, and there is difficult to find a sharp difference between country and city. But in Latin America, the problems of urban concentration in big mega cities has been very important. So the urban sprawl is lived very much as their impact on the inner city. And there is a very important movement in Colombia for providing of good spaces. The different, for example, this is a bridge for cars, and it tries to provide space for pedestrians and a nice environment, trying to reduce the impact of these big connectors in the city, or these spaces. Both are from Daniel Bonilla recently. But of course, the initiative, some of the people here have been juries of the prize of the Latin America Rogelio Salmona Prize, and know these projects that with Latin American criteria tries to give awards to the architecture that makes better cities. And until today, there have been three prizes in 2014, 2016, 2018. One in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the other one in Cuenca, Ecuador, the other one in Valparaíso, Chile. And is a very interesting thing, because is the effort for making a prize, a Latin American prize that sees through Latin American eyes, Latin American problems in architecture. Other big aspect of today's needs are economic equality, the inequality of the world. In that, Colombia has made an effort, an important effort. The most known is the Medellin's works on our public spaces. And Jose Manuel told me about this problem, so I introduced a comment about this project that had a prize in the Ibero-American Biennial of Architecture and Urbanism. Was very laureated, published everywhere as a big project, but it has some such bad firmity conditions, the bad construction, that all this wrapping that was so appealing in the photographs fell down, and now it's in its bones, and their bones are not so pleasant. So today is a big problem in Medellin. This so valorated architecture that was seen only through photographs. From Medellin, I prefer to show as an effort to diminish inequality, these mechanical stairs that I found very interesting, because the main problem of these shanty towns, or I don't know how to call it, suburbs, are to get up and get down, especially when it rains. So to provide of mechanical stairs a part of these slopes, I found it a real effort of the state for diminish inequalities in being, in the existence of the living of people. But there's many collectives making projects in poor areas that helps to ameliorate conditions of people. One of them is this that was finalist in the same Biau of 2019. Is a cinema room for in a barrio. It's called La Potosine in a barrio in Bogota. I put this in well-being, which is the fourth and last of my approaches of contemporary architecture that are considered good architecture by the majority of the people, but that had received previous recognition by professionals. This is the house of the people of El Salado Bolívar, and I put it in well-being because it it faces a big problem with our violence, the violence that had characterized a history of Colombia, a recent history of Colombia, not only the recent, but anyway, there is a place, and here the problem was not that they were many poor people and very few rich people, but that everybody should live better. And this architect especially has a very important conscience of how make people happy and how make the people comfortable. And it's in that sense, and how to forgive the horrors of the processes of violence that specifically this little town suffered. And he designed also chairs that is among hamaca and chair and mecedora. It's a local product that respects the way that people rests and talks after lunch. And of the project, More and Better Schools, that was originally for for Bogota, but after were made in all parts of Colombia, had provided the prizes from the last biennales of the local Society of Colombian Architects, and the winners in many times had been projects that come from that are schools because the community of architects reached or convinced politicians that the problems were not only to make more schools, but to do schools with good architecture, because good architecture was very important for good education. So that I put here just some examples. This one in Medellin. Well, these are in Bogota. This was for the people, the children, the smaller children, and that got an international award. It's a very beautiful school. This is in Cartagena. And on the same trend, every time they are making schools in places, in faraway places, in little towns, all around the country. And this one, which is the prize in 2014, had been very significant in Colombia and very used by the people, this Parque Educativo. And I finished with this Centro Educativo Wali Rumara, which is finalist in this year's Bienal, which is going to be judged in November, but probably is going to be the prize of today's year. It has to do with ethnic groups, community, and the architecture shows all these um, mm, analogies with elements that are significant in the Wayu culture where this has been built. Well, with this, I finished. I hope I was on the time. I think it was a little bit longer, but thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Sylvia.
See,
Thank you so much.
I have to get to just, yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we have some time to discuss, and I don't know if Jose Manuel is going to ask something. I have one question just to start, and it seems that you can tell that some aspect of quality of architecture um, lies in the eyes of some representatives of the community. In both cases, the representative of the community are very involved in theories and ideology of architecture, and there are a kind of what can I say, a frame to look at the persons in this case, in the first case, and the works and the buildings in the second. What kind of view you think the Pritzker Prize changed in time from the very beginning to the new ideas? You said, of course, 4. I think it's very interesting, but I ask you mostly related with the idea of the star architect and which dominated quite few the very first time, and now this kind of what can I say, the new environment about the social ideas and the needed in some different parts of the world.
Yes, I think architecture, and it's clearly in the Pritzker Prize, architecture needs now not only to be beautiful, but also to be important for a community, or to represent a culture, or to have to be responsible with nature, etc. But this is one thing, and the other thing that I think that happened in the prize that I didn't mention was a cultural crisis more general that has to be with the crisis of authority, with the author, the individual author. In architecture, and you see it clearly in young architects, they work in teams. They were, and it's very difficult to say this is the project of this person, because they work many people on a project. Since Koolhaas, when he made his speech, he began to say, well, I'm not alone. I am a team. I work with many people. I am grateful with all my persons that have worked with me. Don't look at me as as um, as a star. I am part of a team. And I think that's general in many manifestations of culture. People that says or that shows that the star system had died long ago, 20 years ago at least. But I think that's a question that is felt in architecture, that is felt in many other manifestations of culture.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia. Please, if you have questions, press the button showing the hand up, and please, Jose Manuel. The microphone, Jose.
When Sylvia, when you elaborate the list about the prices and Venice prices, or you find some surprising absence holds architects that you consider that could be awarded and finally disappear for reason that at times is not very clear is a question for me. There are, and I know if you has checked the list of the candidates that disappear without evident reasons.
Yes, yeah, of course. I have been jury many times in things, and I said I would awarded or this person that does appear, or this was a mistake. This was clearly a mistake, of course. And quality shows through time. It shows alone through times, without recognition, without juries, without prizes. Prizes is something that when many time has passed, a lot of time, centuries have died, it's evident what has quality and what has not quality. It's an inherent quality of architecture, possibility of architecture is to have a special quality, to be beautiful. And this shows flourish through time. But the problem is that we have short lives, and we need quality in architecture. So we need these filters of experts that shows quality to be sure that we appreciate what should be appreciated. But of course, there is all types of injustice. I don't know what else.
But do you think that it's possible that the Pritzker Prize, for instance, is becoming something more, in certain way, political than in the relationship with the quality of the architecture?
Oh, it has always been political. It has always had a geopolitical distribution in mind, but also has and that's why I spoke about the two components of the jury, and it also searches for quality in architecture. I think they may be mistaken sometimes, but I think that both things are important and are well put on the decisions of the prize.
Oh, okay.
We have a question from Wilfred. Please go ahead.
Sylvia, many thanks for powerful, energetic, lucid, and profound lecture. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a mirror of the Vitruvian triad in its tripartite structure, with a theoretical review and a practical elucidation with the Pritzker series of prizes, and then final exemplification of your point of view. I think maybe if I may add one suggestion, is to try to move away from the individual, as you were saying. You remarked quite aptly that Kohlhaas pointed out that his work was a product of a team. A building is always a product of a team, not just an architectural team, but many, many other people. And so the reason why the conference is entitled an international conference on architectural quality, it's not an international conference on architects' quality. And I think that already spans and opens up the spectrum of the things that need to be considered when one looks at buildings or a building, that there's so many aspects that are clearly under the consideration of this analysis. So I would make one suggestion, and that is that the Vitruvian triad is a sine qua non, is a kind of a presupposition that buildings are beautiful, that they stand up, and that they have a particular purpose, or that they satisfy the purpose. But beyond that, they need to aspire to certain things. And what are these certain things? And I would suggest that we are beyond the Vitruvian triad in that sense, and we should be more demanding and more profound in the analysis of buildings, so that we can actually then say, well, it just doesn't. Not only does it stand up, and does it serve a purpose and is beautiful, but it also does more than that, and then it's distinguished.
Could be. I am willing to hear you, to hear all of you, to see if I can clarify all those questions that I made myself also.
Please, William, go ahead. The microphone, please.
Is it on now?
Yes, it's on.
Yeah, okay, excuse me. Thank you, Sylvia. We met many years ago in Bogota. Well, I'm actually a great deal less confident in the capacity of the Pritzker jury to get it right. Quis custodiet ipsos custodies, who will judge the judges? I think the Pritzker Prize it really misses the boat very often. And part of its confusion is that it doesn't actually judge the quality of buildings. It sort of gives an overall whitewash for a career. It nearly committed suicide by starting with Philip Johnson, you know, after all. You know, it was a highly corrupt situation. Thankfully, they brought in Barragan, but it's really been up and down. I had the honor of writing in their own book a long article which was on the first 20 years of the Pritzker Prize. And it was called Matters of Opinion, and it traced the ups and downs in some of the ways that you've also done. But what strikes me is the, let me put it another way, they're very lucky that Alvar Aalto was not alive, that Le Corbusier was not alive, that Kahn was not alive. There has not been a really first-rate architect in the last 40 years. It's pretty well the situation. There have been some absolutely remarkable buildings, and I find it scandalous, for example, that Salomona was not given the prize. Why? Because of the quality of that building at Cartagena, and of course of the towers in Bogota. These are astonishing works of architecture, judged by any means. And one doesn't have to go rushing around, you know, making special conditions because somebody's in a second world country or this or that. There is this thing called architecture. Now, the number of odd choices, Shigeru Ban. When I drive into Paris every time, I am hit in the eye by an appalling building, a glass globe that pretends to be a concert hall, signed Shigeru Ban. When you go to the Pompidou in Metz, you look at a kind of nasty collision between an apartment building and a tent, Shigeru Ban. I could go on and on about, you know, what on earth was Rossi Have you ever seen a single building of any quality by Rossi? No, Rossi was the charmer of a certain period because of a blah, blah, blah about the city and typology. And so on, go on. Now, what about the omissions? I mean, De La Sota, for example, Spanish master, Codet, Spanish master. You know, the list could be quite long. Lasdon, British master. They gave it to Sterling because Sterling was rather easy for most people at the time. So I really have very little confidence in the jury of the Pritzker Prize. And Ada Louise Huxtable represented American provincialism at its worst, North American provincialism. Absolutely no idea of the developing world whatsoever. India, thank God they chose Doshi. I chose Doshi 30 years ago when I wrote a monograph about him, but they didn't choose him for the right reasons. So I think that to posit the Pritzker as a sort of golden mean of quality is very risky. Their criteria are never clear. And the real risk is, of course, this overall choice of a whole career. Now, when they gave it to Toyo Ito, I happened to have been in Barcelona at the Plaza de Europa, where there are two skyscrapers that look of this as if they've developed bad throat cancer. Toyo Ito, horrible buildings, seriously bad. And yet the usual rhetoric came pumping out of, you know, this, that, the quality, blah, 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 blah. So I'm a critic, and I think that the critic has to react to individual buildings and not to careers. I actually suggested a grading system, like in college, and where you would give, for example, Rafa Moneo, let's say B+ for Merida, but a D for the building in Seville. Renzo Piano, you give, well, maybe A- for the Baile, but then you would ask him to give the prize back for having screwed up Ronchamp of Corbusier. So let's be serious. I mean, this group of people who run the Pritzker, some of them know about architecture, others really don't. A lot of it's vanity, and it's a power game in the profession. So I think that our job is actually to judge buildings ourselves. I don't actually think there's authority in any jury anywhere, and I've been in many, many juries. It's an approximation. So anyway, tomorrow I'm going to put my case for a different view of how criticism should operate. With all due respect, Sylvia, the first part I found very intriguing, but really, Pritzker, let's get serious.
There is one exception of what you say. John Utzon. Utzon was given the prize just because the Opera House in Sydney.
No.
I mean, they were evaluating one building, and
No.
and the jury mentioned that, and it was the architect of one building, and
No.
that's because that building that he was chosen.
No, Utzon, when I wrote that actually text in the late 90s, I said it's scandalous that you people have not yet chosen Utzon. It's not just Sydney Opera House. There is a seriously good architect, the Bagsverd Church, absolute masterpiece, a range of thinking on housing and everything else. To give it to Johnson and not give it to Utzon is madness. This is madness. Utzon is one of the very few major architects of the last 40 years. So, you know, really, I don't know where you get the idea that it was somehow just Sydney Opera House, which is not a bad reason, although it's an incomplete building in many respects. So, you know, I'm a historian and a critic, and I maintain perspective on a longer view. Gottfried Bohm, for heaven's sake, third-rate German architect. What was that about? You know, they really have missed the boat. Portsenpack, do you realize what rubbish Portsenpack has built? Jean Nouvel.
Yeah, I agree that.
No, but I mean, you know, Jean Nouvel, the number of terrible buildings that Jean Nouvel's done.
Okay,
so let's talk about good buildings and bad buildings.
Thank you, Williams. We have a list of interventions, so I'm
Good.
sorry and must cut all. Luis Noel and then Fernando Diez. And if there are any one more, I can take notes, please. Just show your hands. Okay, go ahead, Luis.
Thank you, Horacio, for letting me speak. And thank you, Silvia. I enjoyed your input. And I quite understand why you had to take one measure and you took the Pritzker. You could have taken any other, but the Pritzker is the one we all know, and I agree with you taking it. But my question goes in another sense, and it's probably something we have talked, not probably, we have talked about this, and it's related, to my mind, to what Jose Villagrán Garcia put as another value in architecture, that is the social part, and how even the Pritzker now, but especially in what you have shown in Colombia, and we have examples in so many other countries of the quality of architecture that deals with social demands and problems related also to the 2030 UN requirements. So I think there is also a shift outside beauty, but beauty is there, and a shift outside of just looking at technology. Now we're looking at social environment, social demands, social reasons. And I think that was the last part of what you show, and I thank you for that.
Well, that's quality looked as a short, in a short period, a contemporary period. And this social aspect is very important for the contemporaries of an architecture. But architecture lasts much longer than people. And then good architecture or quality in architecture can be used or appreciated in different ways by other generations, even centuries after it was made, and it used a social contribution or not. So there is something about quality that must transcend. I understand the importance of the social commitment, but there is something on quality that must transcend that short period of time of our lives.
Sorry.
Sure.
Thank you, Silvia. Thank you, Luis. Fernando, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Well, I think, Silvia, hello. It's a pleasure to hear you, always learning from you. And I think Silvia went through the Pritzker Prize like an anthropologist. She is interested in what happens to society. So it's very courageous from her to go with this so perceived as a frivolous prize and to analyze it. So I think it's true. It's the true effect is done by this big big media impact of these prizes. So we must acknowledge it. And I agree also with William on the importance of buildings over people, of authors. And I think this is an interesting issue. But at the same time, there are some practices that can only be acknowledged because of a series of very little works. And thinking about Glenn Market, which with only one house of those houses, he wouldn't have been noticed perhaps. So the series is important also. And then I want to just make a short comment on the social issue, because with the social issue, it happens for me something similar to the heritage. We worked so hard in the 80s and 90s to establish the idea of heritage, of preservation, of conservation. And now we must fight against excessive preservation, which is in the fact of course, we are all trying to, that architecture works towards a better society, that address the social issues. But I'm not sure that in all cases, purpose involves quality. So in some cases, I see that there is a kind of frontier that is difficult to discern whether a work of architecture is awarded because of quality or because of purpose. So I would like Silvia to comment on that.
Well, I don't know.
Okay, Fernando.
I don't know what to answer, to be honest. Let me think about it.
Okay. Any more questions?
I think William wants to say something.
Yes, William, go ahead.
You
In
need
a
to
brief,
unmute. You need to unmute.
The microphone, please.
Is that on now?
Yeah.
Yeah. This question of broader social impact is obviously of great importance. But I think that there have been different ways in which different prizes have approached these questions. Having been involved, for example, with the Aga Khan Award a long time ago, and in taking quite critical positions with regard to them, by the way. But there was a huge effort when assessing buildings to send out people to do really detailed technical reviews of the buildings, including their social impact. I had the extraordinary chance to go, of all places, to Saudi Arabia and operate as a kind of spy behind the scenes as to what decisions were made with regard to three quite important projects there. One of them a major skyscraper by Gordon Bunshaft, the Jeddah Bank, but since he was Jewish, he was never allowed to go there, but he produced a masterpiece. But anyway, the point is that was a rich society. But what's much more interesting is how one assesses the impact of, say, a housing thing, say the Previ housing in Peru, for example, which has not been a great success, although it was woven into every single Congress in the 70s as a responsible way to handle mass housing. Or Doshi's housing, where the intervention is only partly by the architect and the rest is left to the users to gradually coagulate their own way of life around them. And I think these are all worthwhile things, but I do believe that I remember saying, let's not be talking about, architecture with a big A is only for well-off societies. It's small a for other societies. No, everybody deserves a marvelous space. Space itself doesn't necessarily cost anything. I mean, high architectural quality needs to work on for the poor on the widest possible level, and of course in terms of public space and urbanism. So I feel that I think it's quite good that they gave a prize to Francis Quéré, for example. That to me was a very intelligent choice. It hits a lot of the buttons because he's working in very different conditions in Burkina Faso. He's working in very interesting cases of technological transfer from Germany to Burkina Faso, but he's making very beautiful buildings for people, and they clearly think so too. And he's doing it out of almost nothing. Brick, mud, bamboo, fronds, air, light, greenery, a little bit, water. So that's, to me, a case of really an intelligent choice.
Thank you, William. Anyone else? So thank you again, Silvia, for this marvelous lecture. We have some minutes for rest and for coffee, and coming back in at I don't know what time it's over there.
At half an hour past the hour, so we have 17 minutes break. Looking forward to having you all back. Thank you, Silvia, once again. Wonderful presentation. I'm very happy that you were the first. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wilfried, I send you a message. I don't know if it's necessary to.
Now we have lost our moderator.
Okay, I can do it. So, Luis, you need to show your presentation.
Yeah, I'm going to show in the screen.
Okay.
Entendido. Okay.
I
This
think
is
it's
the
working.
presentation of Luis Miguel Cortés Sánchez from the School of Architecture in Sevilla, Spain. He's in a. I'm very grateful to present him, and so because I know the circumstance, personal circumstance, very difficult to be here now, and also with our difficulties for the connection, initial difficulties, he joined this at the previous difficulties, and is very interesting to be here finally. Luis Miguel, reflecting on temporal distance in the recognition of architectural qualities, a very interesting point that you have time without problem, because the other two initial participants in this session, for personal reasons that are is not interesting to tell, they give up, and finally you are the only one speaker, the only one presentation after Horacio and me, but also join some points and some speeches, but now the time is for you, because you are alone.
Okay. So thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Luis Miguel Cortez. I'm a member. I belong to the Department of Architectural History, Theory and Composition in the School of Architecture in Sevilla, in Spain. First of all, I would like to thank to the organizer, Jose Manuel, thank you, and also Wilfred, thank you for having me here and the institution who made possible this series of conferences. So thank you to give me the opportunity to take part in this series of lectures. So yeah, my presentation is entitled, as Jose Manuel said, Reflecting on Temporal Distance in the Recognition of Architectural Quality. I would like to take this opportunity to bring to the table the importance of the temporal distance in the recognition of architectural quality and how, in the end, science proves an architectural work of quality to be right, even though a priori it might have been debuted.
Excuse me, Luis Miguel, can you move closer to your microphone because the sound is a little bit uneven, and it would help if you were, if you were closer to the microphone. Thank you.
Yeah. Also, I'm going to try to speak louder. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to start asking the question. Of course, from my point of view, I want to tell you what is the architectural quality to me. To me, is defined by the combination of all the elements that make up the work, the result of the computation of all the elements that enrich it and make it unique, responding not only to the formal or special issues, but also to cultural responsive specific to the moment in which they are made, and even ahead of their time, proposing new paths that will be served for future experience and future architectures. This contributes to considering the quality of the architectural work from the moment that the architectural idea started, as this reading provides a special keys that will lead the project in one direction or in another. That is to say, from the beginning of the design process, understanding that the project must give a more complex response to a system of requirement, which derives in a formal or material response with which the future special experience are built. The objectives decided in the first phase of the design process will be generated and so to be archived. In this way, the circle is closed from the moment a proposal is put forward, which starts with an idea with the aim of solving problems or achieving objectives, to its formalization to make it a reality. This means that the whole process in which all these elements come into play defines the quality of the architectural project, not only as an object, but as a complex process from the start of the project until it finally becomes a built reality, in which the phenomenological aspect also contributes to ensuring that the user experience is that the architect has the design as objectives to be archived with architectural work. Throughout history, there have been examples where it has been necessary to look back after a period of time in order to find the project again. And in the future, this will continue to happen. This temporal distance often serves as an element that reinforces the architectural quality that we failed to see or appreciate. On other occasions, this same distance has served to ratify that this quality had not been achieved, or that with the pace of the time has disappeared. So maybe we have to think about the quality of this architect. Here you have on the screen this very famous project of the Suomalainen brothers. And now today, this is one of the most visiting buildings in whole Finland. At the moment, it was completely destroyed by the critics and other architects. The period of the 60s was so crazy with this building. So here you have the different drawings about the project. I'm not going to go deep with it, but I want to show you how they change all the design process in this way, trying to look for these new paths. So in this case, we will first of all highlight the value of architectural quality from the cultural response with which the design of the building is confronted, obtaining as a result form that move away from the trends in favor of seeking the motive or relationship with the cultural context in which it is inserted, social landscape, formal and material values, among others. To illustrate this, to need a pause and re-review the project as times go by. I will talk briefly about the experience of Riley and Reima Pietila architectural work that you see both of them on the screen. Riley and Reima Pietila work from its beginning in the middle of the last century to the end of the last century has been based in this cultural response, like a global combination of physical reality, conceptual reality, and also the cultural reality. The work of Pietila's work carried about the period between the last 50s, beginning of 60s, till the lax of the near to the 60s and 70s, motivated by the experimenting with the physical and natural components of the project, mean the beginning of a new path, far removed from the architectural trends of the time, and which is nevertheless a result of projects of great architectural quality, such as the project from the Pavilion, also Kaleva Church, Dipoli, Subikumpu project, housing, and also the competition for Malmö. With this temporal line, we can see how this first part about this period between the 60s and 70s, they started with a lot of projects, and then when they finished all of the project, they stopped the work, cause of them and cause of the criticism of the critics of the period of time. I want to show you some pictures and also some drawings about the Dipoli experience. Also, I'm not going to go deep on the project, but this project started a new path, a new experience in the architectural that they usually of the rationalism takes on this time, and also the place, the landscape, the relation with the cultural values takes on this project. These drawings of Reima Pietila from the beginning was completely ahead of the time. These are pictures of the building today. But all of this drawing, all of this experience at this moment was completely crazy. And the people and the majority of the criticism of this period didn't see it like a very good building. We need some time to take the value of it. Also, the innovation in the whole the structure of the building, all of the plan, it's crazy. So the second half of the 50s in Finland was a time of enthusiasm for openness after the sense of anguish and the confidence of wartime. Out of this enthusiasm came the rationalism and utopian optimism developed in the 60s. The 60s was a decade of social consciousness, freedom from the combination and the internationalization. Indeed, there is every reason to claim that the 60s was the last utopian era, when the rationalist constructivists began to emphasize an industrial aesthetic, adaptable system, and the consciously impersonal expression of the form. In the early of 60s, Reima took the opposite direction that we can see with Dipoli and with the other projects, to go in direction with the morphological style, describing the process of producing architectural form, combining landscape architectural forms as a unique in relation with the city and also with the building. The building was understood just a member of the landscape. This, for this moment, was a very, very strange idea in whole the sense, and not only like in a little combination, like to try to understand the building as a part of it. Dipoli received praise from Christian Nobel and other critics from other countries. We can see it here in this number of the Architecting magazine, that you can find the articles talking in a good sense about the project. But in the next number, one of the most famous critics of the architecture, who is Juhani Palasma, wrote an article about her vision of the building, not in a good way like Christian, was more criticizing with the building and with the things that they made. Here we can find this number exchange of letters between Pietila and Juhani, and this like the response between both of course different opinions. But with that, I want to show you here on the screen. You have these letters that they send each other. But as far as some of the specialist critics concerned, Juhani Palasma was one of the most important opposite critics. Although this position softened over the time, but he never really wrote or appreciated Pietila's phenomenological approach, despite written publication and text in praise of that approach. He changed his mind, but it's quite hard to find like this of text in which you can read the good things of, for example, Dipoli project. But for example, other architects and criticism change their mind. For example, this is the case of Kaisa Bronner, who at the beginning was in a very similar thought about Dipoli like Juhani Palasma, but through the time nowadays with this book, she showed how she changed her mind about the architectural work of Pietilas. So like with this passing of time, you can see the different values of the architectural. This is a picture in the archive of the Museum of Finland Architecture. It's interesting that you can see the different folders with cutting of press of the newspapers of this period of time, that you can see different opinions, different, the majority of them are very hard criticism to their buildings. Also Manteniemi, one of the last projects they made. It's really interesting how nowadays this kind of opinion changed. But I want to talk about also not only to the criticism that changed their mind, like Juhani Palasma, that at the end he collaborated in one of the more special last book made by Pietila's work that is made in Spain as a result of the exhibition in the Eco Museum. But there are other criticisms like Malcolm Cantrill, Roger Conant, that they always appreciate and valorate the work of Pietilas. Also other like Anon Iskan and Christo Benikansan. So it's good to show how things have changed over the time. For example, next year is the 100th anniversary from the birth of Raimi Pietila in Finland, in Helsinki, also in the Aalto University, in the place that he was very, very criticized. It's going to be like a special year for him, doing different activities like Congress, courses, focus on their project and their experience. So it's interesting because at the beginning, Pietila has to change the university to go to Oulu, not to stay at Helsinki, because of all of this opposite criticism made by the architecture of this period. Yeah, I want to finish with this picture of the Dipoli roof taken by Riley Pietila. She loves to photograph the buildings from the roof because she told to Ainon Iskane that this is the best point of view to see the relation with the landscape. It's hard to read, but Riley Pietila told Ainon Iskane that she only heard one good opinion about Dipoli project, and nowadays this is one of the most interesting buildings in Helsinki. So I hope with this small intervention I demonstrate that there are some works that at the time might not be correctly valued, but nevertheless, the passage of the time, looking back with a new look, give them the recognition and they truly deserve. So thank you so much to all of you.
My microphone was out. I don't know if it's better to start with the question now or to wait to end after the intervention of Horacio and me. Horacio, what do you think? Well, I don't know. Where is Horacio? But okay, Wilfred.
Yeah, up to you, Jose Manuel.
Okay. What do you think? We can present our ideas, and after I think the discussion for the three together, not one after other. No, it's better.
Okay.
Can you start with your presentation or?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'm going. No, okay.
I think it would be good to have some questions and answers specifically for Luis.
Okay.
Oh, better. No, for Luis, better because in this way.
Yeah, I think we have 10 minutes, and
yes.
how the format was intended. I would like to thank you for this presentation. I think it was very insightful and very important to have this point of view in this conference. There are two aspects. I mean, one is that architects are on the one hand pioneering, and on the other hand their work is transcendent, as Sylvia already mentioned in her presentation. So these two issues about how works of architecture actually go beyond time, on the one hand, by being beyond time, literally, and by being pioneering. Those are two different aspects. I think are very insightful and very fruitful points of view. Similar fates were suffered by other colleagues elsewhere. I mean, Hans Scharoun was never very popular in Germany as a whole, and his colleagues, Fehling and Gogel, who were also very important architects and made some very powerful institutional buildings for the Max Planck Institutes, they were also marginalized. So I think there is always a time to reflect, and I must say one of the greatest and most generous gestures must surely be if a critic admits to having been wrong some years ago, and then to proceed to write a book. I think that's I think it's an important ability to be able to say, you know, that judgment has been wrong, and therefore apologies, and to set the record straight as to how one thinks. So thank you, Luis. Maybe you'd like to respond.
Yeah, I agree with you. Of course, our vision of the things change with the time, so it's necessary, like a lot of times, to stop it and check again the things. And of course, this historical building, because they were made, in the case of Pietila and Suomalainen Brothers project, were made in a very strange situation in Finland. This period of the 50s and 60s were a period for a lot of change, also with the movement for architecture. So they started the new path, the new architectures that were understood. But nowadays, when you check the projects, you can see all these values of that they were thinking the connection with the nature and the connection with the identical and the cultural response of the building with the place. This is nowadays a very trending topics, but at the moment there were not so much architects doing in this. Of course, the rationalism in Helsinki was so powerful, in contrary with all of this project. You have to check the timeline with the Pietilä's work. When they finish this period, they have more than 10 years without a building in Finland. They, I think the first building after this period, I don't know, maybe another smaller, other kind of, but the representative project was the Palace of Kuwait outside of Finland. And then they had to wait until 80s to come back to start with the Erbanta project, also the others for Helsinki. They were so criticized, not only, of course, not only for the kind of architectural, but this kind of architectural were so expensive, and there were, of course, I can understand this point, but there were silent. You have to check so in deep if you want to find these documents or other people that values this kind of architecture. So the experience of Kaisa, it's really good because, of course, at the beginning she thought more in Palasma way, but with the pass of the time, now she said, okay, maybe this give me other vision and other things. I can identify other aspects. So let's see. She made this book. I don't know the exactly date, but I think it's less than 10 years ago, in the 2016 or more or less. So maybe not all the people are agree. That's why I started that the Times is not only to see the things in a good way, maybe something that you at the beginning thought, this is a good architecture, this is a very good architectural quality, but then with the passing of time, you check it that this was not, you were wrong. That's why the time, the reflection of the time, I thought that is a very interesting point to bring here to this debate about the architectural quality. Not only with Pietila, Pietila was like the example to show you, but the concept is global. I mean, something that you can use it here today, of course, in the future.
Sengul have a question. It seems that Sengul have a question, no, to do. No? Okay. I have a little question to you.
William.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for this this presentation. Finland is a country which I've been extremely involved in for a long time, and have just finished a book on Leviska, who is I think a great master, still alive. But I think that in the context of Finland, it's useful to point out that Aalto himself was buried for a period, including by Palasma. You know, that he was such an enormous figure, nemo propheta in patria, and at the end of his life, he was almost an oppressive national monument. A younger generation did not want to hear any more about Aalto. So there was a kind of gradual rediscovery of Aalto. Now, speaking as a historian, what interests me is why people recuperate and what language they use and what concepts they use in the recuperation. The whole Pietila story is partly one of institutional struggles within Finland, and especially the Museum of Finnish Architecture, and a certain line that took a more rationalist view of architecture, such as Ruusuvuori, a poet, nonetheless, and so forth. And so, you know, there are institutional issues there in how things were assessed and how they were placed. But the recuperation of Pietila, I'm a little unsure what form that's taken. I never had any problem about putting Dipoli in modern architecture since 1900. On the other hand, I do think we're back to the question of judging buildings, because Dipoli is a remarkable work. I also happen to think the building in Delhi, the Finnish embassy, is a remarkable building which took years to complete. On the other hand, he was also capable of doing something really terrible in Tampere, the shopping center. And the risk with the Pietolas was this kind of over-simple attitude to nature, almost simplistic translations from bird shapes or whatever. And I must say that the house of the president of Finland doesn't strike me as being anything like the same quality as the early works. So I take your point about the importance of a reevaluation, but since we're hammering away on the issue of quality here, I still think one has to talk about when they really make it and when they don't in their architecture.
Yeah, this is the point, the re-evaluation. I mean, it's the main concept that I want to translate to you, is the re-evaluation. Takes the time to, okay, let's see again. Maybe it's in a good way, or maybe it's okay, it's still going not good. So in the works of Pietila, you can find different kind of projects, more with this connection with the nature and with the landscape, other more in concepts of forms. You can identify different periods of the development of their work. So yeah, in this case, I bring Dipoli because it's one of the more complex building that they made in this first period. That's why I use it. But for example, it's also a good project to talk about the Tempelieko Church from the Somalines brothers. In the presentation, I only show you these pictures. I don't talk so much, but if you see the newspaper of this period was completely destroyed, the criticism from the building. And if you check the different proposals for the third competition, because the history of the competition of the building is another for another day. But yeah, it's good to see like this kind of revaluation. And nowadays, more people understand not only the architectural, not only architects, also the common people of the cities appreciate and reevaluate the building. So I agree with you with this concept of reevaluate. I like the word, like, okay, stop and let's see again. So thank you for your comment.
Have another question. Hasna?
Thank you. I would like to, excuse me, I would like to ask you a question about the role of photography, because you have included fascinating photographic material in your presentation. So could you tell us from your point of view, obviously you have done a lot of research of archival materials from especially architecture of temporary character, like exhibition architecture, exhibition pavilions that are perhaps not existing anymore. And how do you see the role of photography in shaping the what we see as a quality?
Yeah, one of the pictures that I saw you was made by me, other was made by a professional photographer. Two more, I can't remember the name. So of course it's important, and the materials of the building. It's in the case of Dipoli, it's one of the most the experience of the buildings in relation with the materials, because it's the connection with the landscape. So with the materials, you can see this connection that they felt at the beginning of all the process. But when you check the project of Dipoli in the archive, you can see more than 1,000 of drawings. And the same with photographs. And there are a lot of photographs of the building from the first moment with the before the construction, during the process of the construction of the building, and then after the construction is done, people using the building, and of course after a very recently renovation of the building in 2016 made by Ally Studio, that they in the interior they changed some no materials, but they removed the old parts of the building with new ones, and also with the installation of the air conditioners and all the machines. But you go now and the building is still as the same, that you can check on the old photographs, and this is really nice. But it's not like a fake. I mean, I visited the building a lot of times because I was living there in Helsinki. You go to the building, you feel like this connection with the materials and with the landscape, but this in not a fake way. And when you read that the building was renovated not so much time ago, you say, okay, it's because of the renovation. But I had the opportunity to check the original photos of the building in the 60s, in the 70s, with conferences, with different events, and it's completely similar. It's so fascinating how more than 70 years ago, 60 years from the inauguration of the building is the same, with the same feeling and with the same experience. So it's good. And the photography of the building, it's a very good tool to check like this process. So I hope I answered your question.
See, Trenton have a question for you.
Thank you. Thank you for the lecture. I wanted to somewhat pose the same question that William was posing. What does this say about the quality of the architecture? If a building or an architect and their work in general is taking some set amount of time to be appreciated, does that say anything about the quality? And I mean, to all the seasoned critics here, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Does that have anything to do with quality, or is it entirely a failure of critics, inalienable quality of the passage of time or the resistance of people to new ideas? Are new ideas just doomed to be poorly used, poorly appreciated for a certain period of time?
Yeah,
You're still...
Yeah, good question. From my point of view, when I bring the topic of the time, it's because some architects are made ahead of their time. They are completely new, and they were so criticized because of they are new, and they bring new things that weren't made. So in this point, they are very strange situation because they are starting new path that you don't know it, and it's quite hard to see if it is good or not. It is for other disciplines, you can check it. You need sometimes like to say, okay, now it's working. Okay, it's good, or this is not in the way that I thought. For the next one, we have to check to change it. Here, for example, with this project, there were some architects that identify the quality of the architecture, but the majority not. And this majority that they didn't appreciate or think in this way the building were because they were appreciating the other movement that was at the same time in Finland and in Europe, that the rationalism. So I don't know if the time it's like also from the beginning, but here I want to bring to the table, like maybe we have like to wait sometimes like to check if everything is working, because maybe you thought that was good 10 years ago, the building is completely wrong, and you need to like to start to change it to that's why the time is a need to check the things, not on from the beginning. Of course, from the beginning you can check if the requirement of the moment but the architectural quality is not only for a moment. I think it's for more time, for a longer period. That you need not only 10 years, you need like, I don't know, in this case, we are talking about 50, 60 years ago. So I don't know.
Wilfried.
Yeah. If I just may very briefly, I think it's a very important point that Trent has made, because there is something, of course, very human about the fact that one has a point of view. But if that's an individual point of view, it's maybe not so problematic as if it were a collective, institutional, or even political point of view. And in many countries, there are certain official architectural languages. In Germany, it's the official language is Bauhaus, a neo-Bauhaus, and certainly a rationalist architecture. And I remember not so many years ago when people like Zaha Hadid were beginning their careers, that there was an absolutely abhorrent reaction towards that architecture. Now, we can discuss that anyway, but the point is there are different levels of points of view, individual, collective, etc. And these are sometimes hurdles, sometimes they're not objective, they're very personal, and to fight against these is incredibly difficult. I think that, we can also go back to the issue of the Pritzker, whether that's an institutionalized thing and whether there's a kind of a cohort mentality. So all these things are very important, and I think they all enter the discussion about how we discuss architectural quality.
Fernando Diaz.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted just to, I remembered that there are some prizes that are given to a work that was done 10 years before. So enough time has passed to have a perspective. And I think there are several prizes that focus on this problem, but they are not as successful, I think, in the global media, because nobody has this patience. Society, it has no patience for quality. It is in a hurry. And I think that quality has something to do with patience and with the time you need to appreciate something of real quality. And this would end in a kind of slow architecture that is of little interest for the wide audience of instant interest. Thank you.
Okay. Bueno, we can finish because with that, because we have not more time, no? Wilfried, I think.
No, we have time. We can go
Okay.
until, say, quarter to 6, if people are.
Okay, and in this case, I have a question to Luis. Pietila, they are very good architects, and the opinion of the people change for one time for another. But for me, would have been interesting to show us a list of features of the works that were there rooted, the quality of the works, because for me the buildings is not interesting the opinion of one on the other, the society or the media, but the qualities of the buildings, which they are, the relationship with the landscape, how they are built, the materials, the relationship with the tradition, because it's not, today they are very famous, and I saw the exhibition in the March Foundation in Madrid, and extraordinary, but maybe in 20 years the people forget them, and the works or the buildings could be demolished also. But the quality is something that have his roots and not their roots, and that for me, in your extraordinary presentation, for me, lack that list of the features is not only the shape of the trend of the one moment. No, I think I don't know if you understand my question.
Yeah, yeah, of course I understand you. Yeah, that's why I at the beginning I started the presentation with like this sort of paragraph in say this is like a combination of different elements. It's not this, the architectural of Pietila is not only because of the relation with the landscape. Of course, the experience of Pietila, this is like an example to bring this discourse of the time here. But and of course, there are no trends because they started a new path that is not like the trend of the moment. So the quality that you can find in the architectural of Pietilas, it's more complex. It's like this combination of different elements, not only from the technique. It started from the conceptual idea, and they are in this period. They thought in this period the relation with this cultural system, a very complex system, and relation with the identity of the place. This building was made at the end of the 50s, the beginning of the 60s. So in this moment, they started like to bring the importance of the place and the relation with the environment and make a unique the project. But this is for the Pietila's work. But I don't want to say that the other movements didn't get the architectural quality. I mean, this is like this movement that they started with this connection with the humanism, with the place, with the nature. But also you can find architectural quality in other movements. It's not. I don't know if I understand. It's like, okay, you need the time to check if this element of the list that you are asking me made the architectural quality. But maybe the architectural quality in this case with the Pietila, that is the combination of the more theoretical and also the when you check the building build, this technical and also the innovation of the use of different materials and this roof that you see. Of course, for me it's a very good quality, but in this movement, more humanism, but also if you check the rationalism movement, you can find very good buildings and with this kind of architectural quality that we are trying to define here. So in my case, the importance is of the time, like to see, okay, reevaluate the project. We need time to check it if the architectural quality, the elements that generate the architectural quality are good or not. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's hard.
Not completely, because yes, we continue and the time and the change of the opinions and maybe the critics with the time achieved to realize that that building was better than I thought initially, but it's not opinion or feelings, or the things have roots and fundaments. No?
Yeah, but the one of the things that I found with Pietila's work is
Horacio,
the criticism architecture. So did you hear me? I don't know.
Yes.
So in this case, the opinion is really relevant. It's not the opinion. I thought we talk about that the different kinds, the different levels of the opinions and the criticism is not like a personal. It gains from the institution. You can check the temporal line with a lack of project between more than 15 years. So it's something that to think about that, the power of these opinions.
Carlos.
Yes. Thank you, Luis Miguel, for your presentation. I would like your comment on 2 points. The first point has to do with the fact that I think that when you're talking about architectural quality over time, I think that you should address two situations which aren't exactly the same. One being the objective conditions of the artifact of the building and the spaces it contains or it encircles, and the appreciation, and that the appreciation changes over time, but the changes in the physical properties of the object remain persistent. So there are 2 time frames, I think, to take into consideration. And the second point I would like to hear your comment on, it's part, in a way, it's part of the previous issue or question, is that the very fact of the building having been commissioned and brought to completion is already a sign of his recognition, at least by some member of the society. So actually, when we're talking about recognition over time, we're also talking about different degrees of recognition over time. And I think that this has to be taken into consideration. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. And also the thing that you say about the 2 different frames of temporal distance, the time of the building, and then of the opinion of the criticism, the institution. Yeah, this is good because for the example of Dipoli, you can check that the time, the evolution of the building is practically the same. Of course, there made changes in the building, but it was very minimal, like trying to adapt it to the new necessities of it. But the building was the same. If you check the pictures from the beginning, like in the 60s, the building is practically the same that you can find today. So why the opinion of the people change if the building is practically the same? So of course, because you need some time, you need maybe change your environment and change your mental opinions about other things, like to try to valorate this, because the building is the same. So what's happened? So it's good to talk about these 2 frames, the frame of the aspect of the building and the community, because if one is still the same but the other change, what happened? Because if both change, of course, it's more understandable, like to, of course, if both change, it's normal to change the opinion, to change the vision. But if the architectural is the same, what happened to the people see the building in other way, to appreciate it or to hate it in other cases? So I agree with you. It's very interesting, this kind of view. Yeah.
More question? If not,
William, you need to raise your hand. I think that would be very helpful. And a general comment, if you want to participate in this discussion or make a comment or ask a question, please go to reactions at the bottom of the window and click on to raise hand. Ruth Figueiredo, please, if you want to ask a question, just click.
Okay, I'll do it again. There.
William.
Yes. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah. I think with very much, I agree with Carlos Seguero. If a building is built, it means quite a lot of people are in favor of the architect. I think there's been a kind of victim game by some critics around Pietola, if I may put it that way. He got enormous recognition, And I mean, Wilfred, you did, when you were in the museum in Frankfurt, you did a whole issue on Finland, a very global treatment. Pietila was very present in that, I think, right? When I did my third edition in '96, he's very present. In fact, the whole point about Finland is it's an archipelago. There are many, many different positions, like most countries. And I think a fair number of us have tried to evaluate you know, the works of Pietila, knowing full well that there are these ideological barriers and all that. That's part of the job we have as critics and historians, is to sideskip the local stories and try and see things from the outside. By the way, what I also like very much about your presentation is that you're at the other end of Europe, looking towards Finland, and this whole process of north-south, you know, is something which, you know, is wonderful. I remember the Finnish pavilion in Seville in '92, which was maybe the best of all. But, you know, Spaniards have often looked at times for inspiration in the middle north or even the very far north. So that's, I think, to your credit. But coming back to some of the things that Wilfred's bringing up, you see, I think people choose architects of the past or architectures because they're trying to answer a question in their own time. So they project to some degree what they want. I mean, maybe you, I have no idea, I don't know your work, but are preoccupied with issues of nature and so forth, and you find a resonance chamber. I wouldn't know. The opposite is also true, though. We're talking about reassessment. We could also be talking about burying, how critics bury or how they overrate. I mean, when I first became involved with the Comité International des Critiques d'Architecture, it was 1984-85, it was because I wrote a demolition of postmodernism done by analyzing buildings, not by just the blah, 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 because a whole period was being manipulated to misportray modern architecture. You know, for example, Mies was demonized in the most ridiculous way in that period. So a resuscitation had to take place. But Mies, for example, is constantly being reread. You know, one minute people are interested in the classicism in him. The next minute it's materiality, then it's abstraction, then it's resonance with Japan, then it's because it's a bit of a landscape, and this, that, the other. This is perfectly normal in a way in the construction of positions in architecture, that there are readings and profitable misreadings. The historian, I think, has to use a scalpel to cut between them and reveal these different ways of reading things. But there are sort of blanket values operating at certain times, which are almost unconscious. I would say they're what we call the problem situation of architecture, which influence the way not only that people look at the present, but the selective vision they have of the past.
Wilfried, there are no more questions? Luis, you want to answer to William?
Yeah, it was a comment, and I understand it this way. Yeah, it was not like a specific question. Yeah, of course, my interest in Pietila started in other things, but yeah, it was really interesting to me to see the process from the last of the 60s to the first of the 70s. The opposition that from the university, from the museum, from other institutions of the city of Helsinki, he and she suffer. That, for example, they have to change to the Oulu University from the Helsinki, because the institution from Helsinki was not agree with the visions that Pietila was trying to show with the others. So yeah, but yeah, it's I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, in my case, my feeling with Pietila came from other side. Yeah, but yeah, he was trying to show this process, like this lack of work. Why this lack of work from the 60s to 80s in Finland? was because of the majority of the people there, they don't believe in their work in this way. So
thank you. Let's use the next few minutes maybe to
the last question.
no,
No. Okay. Because if not, no question.
I think we should wrap up this and move on to the round table maybe and not necessarily address the Pietiles still.
Okay.
Take the opportunity to for Horacio and Jose to
but until what? Well, no. Okay.
Well, until maybe
continue already.
Maybe until 1:45.
Okay. Okay, Horacio.
May I start? Okay.
Yes. The microphone is yours.
Yeah, I know. Let me see. I must compartir here. Okay, I have just a presentation because Wilfred asked us just to fill the void if we have some, and I entitled "What does architectural quality mean and how to recognize its inherent properties and how its attributes are culturally built." It's a kind of methodological revision of our activity, mostly I can say a kind of Lacanian reflection on our work, rereading and trying to have consciousness of the process we do every time we are trying to or searching quality and trying to have a judgment on some buildings. The call for definition of architectural quality ask, let me see, okay, now. Ask for some questions and I select only 3 from them. The usual definitions of quality indicate that quality are a distinguishing characteristic or attribute and a degree or a standard of excellence. So, of course, as a degree of excellence, quality is comparatively defined. And this is one of the first things I want to point out. The first question is it based on physical facts? That means there are some inherent properties of the work we are trying to criticize. In sum, there are 2, for me, there are 2 important texts. The first is the theory of architecture, developed by the renowned Italian architect, part of the APAO, the Architettura Organica from Italy, who settled in Argentina in 1948. And of course, his former assistant, professor, very well-known critic and art historian, Marina Weissman, both very influenced by the philosophical and aesthetic issues from Benedetto Croce. Tedeschi considered that inherent properties, the situational dimensions, they are here, the relation with the place, the landscape, the nature, the climate, the environmental colors, the cultural dimension, like the inherent properties of the work, movement, densities, fluxes, material culture, population preferences, the adaptation to use. This is interesting because he tried to understand the psychological use, the biological functions, the protection, privacy, tranquility, light, lightness, openness, porosity, promenade, and the interior-exterior connection. The technical and economic aspects, the structure, material production, systems, the form, space, plastic elements, scale, unity, harmony, identity, values, and finally, symbolic expression. This is his house where he developed some of these ideas. At the same time, he wrote the theory of architecture. Actually, it's one of the only efforts to have in one book a theory of architecture of the modern architecture mostly. And the things on so much buildings like this, the Lovell House, very well known, the idea related between structure and plastic elements. The other is, of course, Marina. Marina considered a typological vision, very interesting in the Estructura Histórica del Entorno. The interesting thing is she explained that the inherent properties in typological series, structural, formal, functional, and the typologies of the relationship between building and environment, and the typologies of the use of environment technology. But the main issue, this is one of the buildings, the Healy Getz house she talked about, and another one is, of course, the Salk Institute refer very interesting in the typology of functional typology of the buildings. And the inherent properties are also, and this is the main thing, the social requirement, the architectural theories, the design process, and the production process, like the inherent properties. It's interesting because some of these are related mostly with the second question, which is it a matter of cultural context? And this second question I selected, and the answer is, of course, it is, as quality is mostly, as we defined in the first part, comparatively defined. So I think the most important thing to establish the comparison is to have a canon, which is probably the rule to measure quality, and seems to work as a kind of collective point of view, very established actually. And canon, of course, is the result of inherent qualities, but is mostly a cultural issue. The canon is not only a figure, it is also a cultural operation. The Marcel Ferry was already there as a functional dispositive until Siegfried Gideon decided to establish it as a paradigmatic representation of time, technique, and technology. So the eyes of the discoverer are fundamental, as probably critics when stand out some work of architecture. The process was pointed out, the process of canonization was pointed out by Juan Pablo Bonta, who developed the wonderful ideas about the canon, and mostly the wonderful anatomy on the architectural interpretation on the Mies van der Rohe pavilion, which is actually a very well-known work. He proposed a process of architectural interpretation in his Architecture and its Interpretation that I developed and expanded here, starting from the blindness, the lack of recognition, as he said, going through the pre-canonical answers, the tentative or provisional interpretation, often based in very partial aspects, and the individual reactions, and therefore subject to controversy or debatable. There are mostly plural conjectures. The canonical interpretation, to reach the canonical interpretation as the maximum importance of the meaning attributed to the form of the work, and probably a measure of fully developed statement and verifiable judgment. Then the dissemination, there is also the authoritative interpretation, which Bonta considers mostly the idea of the architect opening ideas about his own work or trying to interpret his own work in relation with the architectural culture. And the dissemination is the moment of the interpretative process in which the canonical interpretation reached the widest public. These are also, there are two new phases. One is the phase of oblivion or silence, something which is evident, for example, in the case of Brasilia, in the journals of architecture from 1965 and until 1990 something, 1999 probably. And of course, and there are new time of reinterpretation, mostly for preservation or later intervention in the building, as Luis just put one of the cases. The third question is, do we need this at all? It's very interesting. Why we need all this? I think it's of course, the answer is, again, yes, it is. Quality is comparatively definite. So the consideration of the idea of masterpiece is really fundamental in this process. And the masterpiece is very well known as a creation that has been given much critical praise, especially one that considered the greatest work of a person's careers, of a work, or a work of outstanding creativity, etc., etc. Mostly the most outstanding piece of work of a creative artist. But it is also the maximum quality of the role, the paradigmatical, archetypal, or representative, and the wide recognition is already there, because it's the society that takes an account the ideas of the critics, and this is a very well-known process. So the masterpieces are in fact, as Ibar Lucia pointed, are privileged means of communication, and they dynamize and update the empathic formulas of the people to the buildings, and have functional properties that are not found in all work of arts, and that benefit cannot be dissociated from the recognition. They exemplify the criterion, the rule, and the measure of the aesthetic judgment, are not based only on empirical, verifiable intrinsic properties, and they also have an intersubjective foundation based on a public consensus. This is some things that Sylvia speak about, and this is my proposal to the session. Thank you.
Okay. Now, yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations for your presentation, Horacio. It's very, very, very interesting. And to end is the better thing that could be happened.
Horacio, fantastic presentation. I would just like to make one comment, because I think it's such a dense presentation. But what I did notice was that you focused or you equated the term quality with excellence and therefore masterpiece. I would say quality itself as a term is much more neutral. And there's a German word which means, which is Eigenschaft, which means the properties that something, an object possesses properties. And so there are qualities that are associated. So it's, in my view, more interesting to speak about this aspect, or what are the inherent properties of a piece of work, and to what extent is that piece of work, in the case of architecture, appropriate for the task. And then you can have a masterpiece within that. A bus shelter, to use a Pevsner terminology, can be a brilliant bus shelter, but it doesn't have to be a design like Zaha Hadid necessarily, right? So it can also be a Miesian bus shelter. Therefore, these things are not necessarily masterpieces in the sense that they are cathedrals, but that they are in material terms, in terms of economy, etc. They have inherent properties that are appropriate to the task. And of course, that's when the critics' lens and the designer's intentions are calibrated relative to each other. And I think that that's where the discussion becomes interesting. But I would prefer to broaden the discussion, not just to relate it to the issue of masterpieces or excellence, but to the notion of appropriateness. And yeah, maybe that's a kind of a qualification to the discussion.
Yes, but in the horizon, the idea of the masterpiece is present, because if you are talking about quality, a masterpiece is the highest quality you can imagine and the most comprehensive consensus about a building. You know, that is the main topic. So the masterpiece is the rule. Every time. I'm sorry, but I said it was a kind of Lacanian process, you know, and it's every time you are trying to judge some critical, you have in mind some masterpieces, because they represented the most important developing things in such wonderful aspects or something. Maybe some of my colleagues said that the worst it's also the rule, but the worst, the world is full of words of bad work. So you cannot. Don't need to speak about the bad things. We need to speak about the good things mostly.
Okay. Very interesting.
There are three questions: Sylvia, João, and then Fernando.
Yes.
Well, I would like to thank Horacio to bring Bonta's work that I appreciate very much, and is one of my key lectures, key reference. I would like to ask this. Bonta was interested on meaning, and that has to be with interpretation. And I would like to ask you if you think that are the same thing. That is, that quality can be reduced to interpretation of quality. Or if there is something objective about quality that is it goes beyond the specific interpretations that have all these contaminations of time, culture, different processes, personal and general processes. So there is something about quality which goes more beyond these specific interpretations, because I think Bonta was thinking not on quality, he was thinking on interpretations and its transformations through time. That's it.
Yeah, thank you for your question. Is very, very fundamental, I think, because I developed the first part related to the inherent properties of the buildings, and that is because I went to Tedeschi and Marina, which used to work both at the same university and in the same courses. So it's very interesting that in the first moment, Tedeschi think that the inherent properties are mostly, what can I say, physical properties of real properties of the building, but Marina introduced the relation between the typologies and introduce in a kind of a series of typology the theory of architecture. That means in the 20th century, all the things produced by critics mostly or theorist, if there are someone over there, but that is the switch I did with the relation of Bonta, because mostly of the history and theory of the history and criticism of the architecture became the theory of architecture in the recent times. So the problem of the quality every time is mediated by this process of canonization of meanings also. Mostly when you have also functional meanings or meanings related with the climate or every etc. So I think there are properties of the quality inherent to the reality of the building, but all the ideas are processed by this idea of canon, of the reference of masterpiece. Mostly because all the organization of the architectural pedagogy is related with masterpiece also.
Okay. John?
John. Oh, thank you. I'd like to thank Professor Torrent for this lecture. It was really interesting. And I also think the process you described, I don't think it is problematic for having these masterpieces as a standard. I had a talk with Wilfred these days about this, how this relationship with the canon, and I think it is how it works. And sometimes, for instance, Comas is here, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at some certain periods, the process you described had some really good impacts on actually city building. For instance, here in Brazil during the 50s and the 60s, in which you had this strong canonization of Brazilian modernist architecture with Niemeyer, for instance, this has pulled a whole plethora of architectural production within Rio de Janeiro, which was really high quality and left some serious good work of architecture. And I think that if this judgment and this canonization is done in a public way and it reaches outside the architecture community, making a public architectural culture, I think it is quite interesting because it permeates the civil society with general terms of quality that in the practice of architecture, going to design and building, it can make easier for good architects to promote such ideas and to go with these sorts of design. And it is a more, even though the masterpiece always has this strong egoic component, I think the whole architecture culture, which is built in a cohesive system within it, doesn't have it because people are trying to make the canon work. And I think this in some cases regarding city building is a good thing.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. Actually, the masterpiece is not bad because it's a masterpiece. You know, it's embody a lot of different inherent properties in a very good way of the process of design and mostly also of the process of production, which is a field not very, what can I say, not very prominent in the criticism in this moment, the production of the building mostly. They are related, and Sylvia shows a case that you should think that the process of design it's related with some fashions or that, but the huge problem is the process of production. But the ideas of the canon are translated to the population of the architectural culture, and we conform a subculture of the population culture, and one of our subcultures are every day operating in the semiotic sphere. So a lot of people are now very interested in the Tugendhat house, or are interested in some buildings, and Instagram and the social network operated in that way, just making the snowball grow. This is kind of and with all the problems of the communication process. Every time I said it's a kind of this joke with the telephone, when you tell someone the first one idea and the last one repeat something no related at all with the first sentence. That is a kind of operation in the culture, mostly now with the fast operation of the social network, that are mostly going with all the concepts we did in a very serious way, but take this way because that's it is.
We have 3 questions, but it's not possible to give more questions because we have no time, and the 3 and the answer is necessary to be very short, because we need to finish around the 6 p.m. 6 minutes is necessary to be in a hurry. Okay, Fernando.
Well, thank you again, Horacio, for your wonderful presentation and remembering Juan Pablo Bonta, how much we learned from him. And of course, I was wondering whether the masterpiece and the master are necessary because of our lack of judgment, of our lack of being able to dissect the work of architecture and understand the different qualities. And in some way, I was thinking about the problem of architecture in the 20th century, how difficult it is to establish a canon when originality and the original is a quest that is asked for every student to achieve a different thing from the last one. So I think in some way we haven't been able to build a canon because of this plural and extraordinary diverse world we have built, and instead the masterpieces are like lamps in the night of architecture that guide us, because we lack the most essential ability, that is to differentiate each aspect of those inherent qualities that Tedeschi was talking about, or Marina more in a more social integrated process. But we lack judgment, I think.
Okay. Horacio?
Thank you, Fernando. Well, what can I say? I'm still thinking on the question of Sylvia, and I think the inherent properties became meanings. That is the thing. I think it became meanings in the what can I say, in the word of meanings. That's simple thing.
Okay, Ruth.
Okay, thank you so much, Horacio, for your great presentation. I like it very much. I will be very brief. I have some questions regarding the concepts of masterpiece and canon. All these categories are, I was wondering whether these categories are still operative for reading today architecture and architectural quality on one hand, and on the other hand, I was wondering who is defining the canon today. What do you think, what are the mechanisms, or who has the authority to define the canon and to raise the quality of architecture today? I don't know if I am going to did understood the question.
Yes, in a very traditional way, the authority is the knowledge. You know, there's very related with the knowledge. So we have a mission in that way. We have what can I say, a very a huge responsibility, because we are the people who have the knowledge to read the buildings and to criticize the designs or the actions. So we are the first point of this infinite promenade for the meanings around the world. I think it's a huge responsibility for us, but because we can read the inherent properties of the building, and we need to have what can I say, a verified judgment. Mostly who have an opinion of a building, it's just an opinion, but the criticism is a serious way to produce knowledge, I think.
Okay, the last one question is by Carlos.
I just wanted to comment on the issue of the masterpiece and the canon, because Wilfred was, I think, it was very shrewd from the part of Wilfred to recall the case of the bus shelter. Yeah, because actually when you talk about masterpieces, and you tend to think about the exceptional programs of society, and the ones that have the most extensive budget, and they're not exactly the same thing. I would say that the problem with using the word masterpiece is that you confound, monument and instrument in a way that makes you forget that a monument has also to work, and that an instrument also has a meaning, and that we do have a difference between the way a bus shelter can be designed and become a masterpiece of its kind. So I think that we should open, our categories, and I think also that we should realize that the situation in society, capitalist or socialist, no matter which, is much closer to the past in terms of having a hierarchy of programs to be tackled by architecture. Then it was the hopes of the 20s, when you sort of thought that every program was to be leveled and the monument category would be dissolved, just like the state that has not yet dissolved.
Okay. Thank you, Carlos. Let me just.
May I have only a little answer on that? But yes, but the masterpiece has a social function also.
But I'm not discussing. I'm not discussing the concept of masterpiece. I'm just qualifying.
It's not related with the hierarchy of the, because I put the Picasso's, which is just to put two things. And it's a masterpiece because the
I'm
inherent
not criticizing
property.
you, sir. Just telling that we tend to. I was not criticizing you.
Okay, I'm out.
Okay, Wilfred.
Let me try and, well, first of all, let me thank Jose Manuel and Horacio Torrent for these moderations and interpretations and interventions. It's been very, very enlightening. We are going to continue tomorrow, and I look very, very much forward to tomorrow's presentations. because the idea is that we accumulate in the course of this debate certain elements of a discussion which may or may not lead us to a more comprehensive set of criteria. And I hope that we can review what we've said today, tomorrow, and in the course of the 4 sessions as a whole. But let me just say that I think it's interesting that maybe if in the absence of what Rute was saying, that it is no longer possible to have canons because there are so many different positions, and Fernando was saying that the strive for originality is actually dissolving the whole notion of some kind of communality that is a basis of the canon. That instead of canons, we have principles that some people aspire to. Not everybody, but there are some principles. And the other thing that we can measure and evaluate is the relation between the intentions of the architects or the building and the realization. And that between these two poles, there are some very objective analyses that you can make to determine whether an architect has actually, or a group of architects have actually achieved what they set out to do. So I'm just opening that as a thought for the next few sessions. And I would like to invite all of you to return tomorrow at 2 o'clock Central European time. This is using the same Zoom link. And I'd like to thank especially those people who've joined us from China and India, where it's already quite late. And I can understand that those people in the Americas are just getting going and beginning to warm up for a nice Saturday.
A little thing, Wilfried. I sent to all people my presentation, my text, and the presentation, because it was not possible to do in with our timetable. And in this way, if someone want to say something or to write to me, I will be very grateful with the commentaries or consideration about my presentation that is I sent to you right now. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, everybody, and have a good afternoon, have a good evening, have a good night, and see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, all people. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.